I'd like to welcome you to the 2018 World Dairy Expo and specifically to this virtual farm tour of Blue Star Dairy Farms. My name is Mary Elvacrogue. I'm a senior dairy lending specialist with Compeer Financial. Compeer Financial is a member-owned farm credit cooperative serving and supporting agriculture in rural communities. We provide loans, leases, risk management, and other financial services throughout 144 counties in Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Today's presentation by Blue Star Dairy will highlight their multi-site farm located in Dane County and southern Columbia County. For those of you that are not from around this area, Blue Star is just outside of Madison, so they did not have very far to come. And you'll learn about maybe what the opportunities and challenges are with having a dairy close to a city like Madison and the surrounding urban communities. I know you'll enjoy hearing about their farm. I would ask that everyone please silence your cell phones, please. And we will be taking questions, but we'd like to take the questions after the presentation. We'll hopefully get to all of them that you have. So with that, I'd like to introduce to you the farm manager of Blue Star Dairy, Sherry Meinholz.
Thank you. All right, can you guys hear me okay? In the back? All right. Great. Thanks for pointing out that you were here. All right, welcome today. And so I'm going to start off telling you guys a little bit about the families that are involved in our farm. So the partnership is currently a partnership between Art Meinholz and his two nephews, Craig and Brian Meinholz. Louis is the father of Craig and Brian, and he's also, I forgot to advance that. I'm doing great already, ain't I? So, and he is Art's brother, older brother, and he's actively retired. So I should have them stand up here. Here's Louis right here. He's here today. Joanne was not able to make it, his wife. And then Brian and his wife Rhonda are both here. And then Art and Lori. And then Dean is also here. So, all right. And I'll be talking a little bit about their roles in a minute. So, Louis is active. He's retired, but he still helps out with the things. I always say when you see the quad track come out, then you'll see Louis come out of the house, because then he gets to drive that and do field work. He helps with picking up parts and things like that. His wife Joanne is still works on the farm as well, and she does our bookkeeping. So Art and Lori and their family. Right there. And they manage the Middleton farm, and they live there as well. And Lori does the office work there, and she does takes care of the calves as well as feeding the calves. She also feeds a lot of the people often. That's one of their favorite parts of working at that farm. And their son Lee is also employed full-time at the farm and plays a very active role in taking care of everything over there as well. Lori does a lot of field trips and tours, and their family is very active in church, 4-H, in the community. We'll talk about that a little more also in the future. And then that is my family. My husband Craig is one of the partners, like I said. He's not here today. And so Craig's main responsibilities as one of the partners is him and Brian manage the DeForest and Arlington farm. He oversees the shop and field crew. And also anyone who knows him knows he can fix pretty much anything. I have just kind of fallen into a lot of different roles at the farm, but mostly like employee and public relations, field trips, tours, payroll, like a lot of office work as well. We have a son, Austin, who just graduated from high school. He's going to school for business management and plans on farming and becoming a partner. So he was active in FFA and during high school and still continues to help with that as well. And then our daughter is Brooke, and she works at the farm mowing lawns and is learning to do more as time goes on. And she's also active in 4-H and FFA. And then we have Brian and Rhonda and their family. Um, Brian manages the DeForest and Arlington farm with Craig, like I said. He oversees the dairy operation, crop planning, financials. He's got a lot on his plate. Rhonda works off the farm as a project coordinator for A&J Property Restoration. She previously worked at Badgerland Farm Credit, which is now Compeer Financial, our sponsor for this tour, as an account officer. And she also, both Rhonda and I grew up on small farms as well, which definitely helps having that background and understanding how things work. They have 3 daughters, Caitlin, Kelsey, and Molly. Caitlin is 14. She's a freshman this year, and she also works at the farm. And her and my daughter, our primary jobs are mowing lawns. You can mow grass for a long time when you have that many properties and there's a lot of grass. She's active in FFA and 4-H as well. And the other 2 are in 4-H, and they are, as they get older, learning to do more on the farm and definitely showing an interest in that, which is great. Dean, that I had talked about, is the herdsman for our DeForest and Arlington farms. So obviously, extremely valuable asset to our farm. So this shows approximate locations of our 3 dairy farms. So we have the Middleton farm, which I'll do a little more history on shortly, explaining where things started in years and things like that. And then the DeForest farm there in northern Dane County, and then southern Dane County, it's only like 4 miles north, the Arlington farm there. And all right, so all 3 of our farms have Germania herringbone parlors. We milk 3 times a day at all locations. Direct load out into the tankers at all 3 locations, and then the AffyLab monitoring equipment. We're currently milking 2,600 between the 3 dairies. We're milking 600 at Middleton. Now, one of the challenges with that farm is obviously Middleton, Madison area moves out more and more. Farmland becomes more valuable, but there's not as much of it because other properties, like anybody that lives in the area, there's an airport in Middleton, and there's land between there and the town. And I remember when I was in high school, I would farm that land, and now it's shopping centers and office buildings and things like that. So there's a lot of advantages to living close to town. It's easier to run into town to get parts and things like that. You have more resources available, but there's the downsides as well. So our DeForest farm, we're currently milking around 800 cows there. Our main offices are located at this farm, and it's also the center for our shop and field crew. They're based out of there. We have our main shop at that location. We raise calves and heifers for both the DeForest and the Arlington farms at this location, and I'll touch base on that a little bit in a few minutes. We have a hospital area for both the DeForest and Arlington farms at DeForest. So we do move cattle daily to back and forth between those farms. We have Comro sand separation building at DeForest as well as Arlington to separate and wash the sand for bedding. So the Arlington farm, we're milking 1,200. And like I said, we have the Comro sand separation building there. We put that in first at Arlington to see how it worked. And again, no treated cows are there, so we move them back and forth. Let's see here. We'll go to our timeline and talk a little bit more about the history. So William and Dorothy Meinholz would be Louis and Art's parents. They got married and started the farming at the Middleton location in 1946. In 1948, they purchased their first new tractor, which was an Oliver 88, and we still have that at the farm. Luckily, anyone who knew Grandpa Meinholz, William, He loved to share stories and talk about the farm, and he loved that tractor. We were able to get that tractor restored before he passed away. And right away, he was saying, then he was like, it's sitting in the shed. He wanted us to use it. Well, our guys are not really particularly going to want to drive that in the fields when they're used to their cabs and their air conditioning and their nice radios, their Bluetooth or whatever. So we decided to use that for our tours and our field trips. We do a hayride to get around the farm. As you saw, the picture of the DeForest farm is quite large. So walking that whole thing, they would be there all day. So we take them around on a hayride, and we use that tractor. We try to use that tractor as much as possible for those tours. It also brings in the history of the farm. They put up one of the nation's first harvesters in 1949. In 1958, they installed a Jamesway double 8 herringbone parlor after helping the company design it, and they were milking about 60 cows at the time. In 1971, they purchased the DeForest farm, which already had a milking parlor in it, which wasn't that common at the time, so that was definitely a highlight on why they wanted to purchase that property. And that picture up in the right-hand corner is Craig, Brian, and Dean. We need to recreate that picture soon, I believe. And so in 1976, Blue Star Dairy Farms was formed as a family partnership between William and Dorothy Meinholz and their sons. So there were 4 sons at the time that were 5 that were involved in the partnership. And so obviously William and Dorothy saw that they had sons interested in this, so they decided to, all right, let's go ahead and make this give us a name. In 1979, they installed a double 10 Germania herringbone parlor at the Middleton farm to replace the Jamesway. In 1994, they installed a new double 16 Germania herringbone parlor at the DeForest farm, and in 1998 added another freestall barn at the DeForest farm. 1999, well, what comes after a new freestall barn? Then we need more room for our calves, so we built an enclosed calf barn facility at the DeForest farm as well. In 2012, we updated the Middleton farm milking parlor to a double 12 Germania herringbone. So we kind of stuck with the herringbone theme. That worked well for our, we'd always had them and it worked well. 2003, we built the Arlington farm and added another barn to the recently built calf barn facility at DeForest to help with, obviously we're going to have more calves, and we added that many more cows. In 2005, we built the large heifer barn at the DeForest farm and added a pasteurizer room for our calves. And I'll talk about that again a little bit more. And 2008, built enclosed calf barn facility at the Middleton farm and added onto the freestall barn at Arlington. In 2012, we put in the sand separation building at the Arlington farm. We had been using sand bedding for a long time. We knew it was hard on the equipment, but once we put that in and we didn't have sand in our manure anymore, then we really realized how hard the sand had been on our equipment. And so we waited a few years. That was working great, so we put one in at the DeForest farm in 2014. In 2013, we added onto the freestall barn at the Middleton farm to improve comfort for the dry and pre-fresh cows. And 2013 added direct loadout for the milk tankers at Middleton. And we added that at DeForest in 2015 as well. So a little story about the picture on the left is my husband and my son. And that was when we took pictures we held the Columbia County dairy brunch at our Arlington farm in 2006. And so we were taking pictures at the Arlington farm for that event, and this wasn't like a planned thing. They were just walking down the freestall barn, and Craig put his hand on Austin's head. So then when we had the photographer out for this event, they decided they wanted to recreate the picture. So that was the point of the picture on the right. It's a little different there. But one thing that the older generations of Blue Star, so starting with William, and then mainly for me, the senior partners, the ones I call the senior partners, which would be like Louis and Art. They probably don't like it that I call them senior partners, but and at the time, Walter Meinholz was another uncle that was involved in one of the partners of the farm. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2015. And so, right, 15. Um, anyway, they were so good at helping plan for the future and letting the next generation decide what they wanted to do. So I remember when we started talking about building this farm in Arlington, you're adding 1,200 cows. That's a big addition. And they basically, once they figured out if they could make it work, they left it up to that next generation because they were the generation that was going to be managing it, that was going to be dealing with it long term. It was going to be their project. And in this industry, that's one challenge that I've heard from a lot of people is having that senior generation that'll let go and allow the next generation to take over and make choices. And it is a risk. And they're putting a lot of faith in that next generation, that they're ready for this, that they can handle it. But they did, and it's doing good so far. So that's been a while now, but that is huge for growth in any business. But when it involves family, that's always a little more challenging to deal with. So and now we're dealing with that with the next generation, with our kids, and trying to want to help them grow their passion for farming and learning, but also not push them so much because they have an amazing opportunity if they want to be in this industry. But anyone who is a farmer knows you have to love it because it's not just a job that you can just go home and not have to worry about. It's a way of life and it's hard work. So we want to make sure that this is really what they want to do. Otherwise, they're not going to be happy and most likely not as successful then. So going on to the areas about the farm, which I already I touched on a little bit, but going into a little bit more depth, I threw this in when we were in the timeline. But the Germania herringbone parlors that we have, Middleton is a double 12, DeForest is a double 16, and Arlington is double 18. Arlington, which is in the picture on the top, has a subway underneath, and so that helps with a lot of the equipment is not visible, it's underneath, so it doesn't get it's bumped into as much. It doesn't have to get cleaned as often because it's not getting dirty. So it helps with the wear and tear on it a lot. And also it's not in the way for the milkers, so it makes it easier for them when they're moving back and forth in the parlor. And again, milk 3 times a day, direct load out, Affilab. Freestyle barns, sand bedded for the cows. We have mattresses for the heifers. The older heifers, the younger heifers have open front barns with bedded packs. Just your typical freestyle barns with misters and fans. And the calf barn. So after they're born and they're moved to the individual pens in the calf barn, they'll be given colostrum when they're still in the pre-fresh area, and then they'll be brought up to the calf barn, and they will be bottle fed for 3 days, and then we switch to a pail, and we use pasteurized whole milk, and we currently feed them twice a day. Once they're weaned, we have panels that you can kind of see in the bottom picture that are able to be removed, and we can start the grouping process to get them used to being grouped with the other calves. So around 3 months of age, we'll move them to the open front heifer barns. 6 months of age, they'll move to the larger freestall heifer barn with the mattresses, and then we also have a breeding room up there, and that's where they will be bred for the first time. So we have a full-time shop and field crew. We're very fortunate to be able to provide them with work year-round. We make that work by. They also do building maintenance. If we have building projects going on, they'll do a lot of work on the building projects as well. Um, they're great at pretty much anything we need done. They can cement like professionals. They're a very talented crew. And of course, right when I started talking about them, they had already left. So now all the ones that were standing back there didn't hear me say all those nice things about them. We also have a handful of seasonal employees that help out when we're in the field, which makes it nice for our full-timers if they do need to leave, or when they're getting in way too many hours. All of our employees are extremely dedicated and put in a lot of hours, as they do on most farms, I know. So we handle all of our crop operations, from planting, spraying, to harvesting and manure application. About the only thing on the farm that we don't currently do ourselves would be hauling our own milk. But otherwise, we, like I said, have a great crew of guys that we've trained over the years, sent to extra classes. They're still always going to certification classes and continuing education classes. So we have around 65 employees at the 3 farms. 12 are family members, not counting the partners. 25 employees have been with us over 10 years, 12 over 15 years, 5 over 20 years, and then 2 at the 29 and 30-year points. This really is, we basically, when my son was younger, he actually thought that some of them were his uncle. And I tried to tell him that they weren't, and he argued with me. So he's like, there's no way we can't be related to Jay. We have to be. And I said, no, we're not, and then finally I just quit arguing. So hopefully at 18, he realizes we're not related to him now. So some of our benefits for our employees, we have health care plan, and we have an IRA that they can sign up for after a certain period of employment, and then we do a company match for that. We have uniforms, which if you don't work in the industry, you don't realize how big of a benefit this is, because those are provided clean every week, and then they leave the dirty ones there, so they can come to work and change into their work clothes, change before they go home, so they don't have to get their car all dirty, and their wife or themselves or whoever, they don't have to do all the laundry. And so it's a very nice benefit for them. We do have a fair amount of housing if available and if they need it. And that is nice. It brings them, or keeps them usually closer to the farm, especially in the winter. So that's nice. And it's more affordable for them. We have our parties. I think that's why everyone stays so long, because they like coming to our parties. So that's why they stay working for us. But we try to do that just to get to the time to hang out with them and talk to them outside of work, and also spend more time with their families, getting to know their families and things like that. Let's see. So employee management. This is something that I think is a big struggle for a lot of farmers, especially ones that started small and slowly got bigger, or even quickly got bigger, because a lot of us know how to take care of the animals. We know how to do field work. We know how to do all that. But employee management is a whole different ball game that's not the same as the other things that we do on a daily basis. So it's always learning for everyone involved. But we hold monthly meetings to keep our communication open. Of course, we provide food at those meetings, because that's always a big plus and makes people actually come. They are mandatory. And then we also have a translator for our Hispanic employees to make sure that they can understand everything, and any sign I hang up at the farm, even if it doesn't necessarily pertain to them, I make sure to translate it, because I never want them to feel that any information that we have that we're hanging up isn't important enough, that they're not important enough that they should be able to read what it is. So I do think that that's very important in keeping that teamwork feel and making them feel like a part of the group. Consistent training, consistent meetings. The training to keep everyone safe, of course, is extremely important. We have a lot of written protocols. There's written protocols for almost everything. And a lot of people that have worked there for a long time, they don't need to go back and look at it, but it sure comes in handy when that person is sick or not there and no one else knows how to do it. And just to keep everyone on the same page. Animals are creatures of habit for the most part, and so we like everything done the same. We do try to send them to, like I said before, like if there's training seminars, a lot of the different organizations we work with have multiple training seminars and things like that over the whole year, really. And all of that is extremely important in helping them learn more and be an even more, or offer more to the team. So community involvement, and this is a very big part of our farm. We love to share our farm with people, and we also love to educate them. And given technology and social media is definitely changed all of that a lot. There's a lot of things that people believe everything they read on the internet. It's really scary. And so helping them learn the truth without, acting defensive. But I think the best way for us to do that is to show them, because they come out and over you get the comments that, oh, you guys must have spent so much time cleaning up for today, or and I'm like, no, this is how it always looks like this, and this is how we always take care of our animals, and this is what we always do. And they are, I've definitely had people coming in when we do field trips, and you'll have some chaperones, some parents that you can tell coming in they're not big fans of farming. And I'm not there to make everyone, if I can't change everybody's mind, but if I can at least show them from my side and show them. One of my friends, a girl I graduated with, I was friends with her on Facebook, and she had a lot of negative comments every time I would post a picture about the farm. And so finally I confronted her in a private message about it, because she lived kind of far away. And she just said that, animals shouldn't be kept in cages. They should be running free, things like that. And recently in the, and I'm not saying that there are definitely some farmers that aren't doing a great job. Not very many, but there's some. There's a bad apple in every industry. If they're not treating their animals right, they're not going to be successful, especially right now. Of all times, they need to be on top of their game. And so a child had recently died, a baby had died in a daycare. Extremely sad situation. But I said to her, you take your kids to daycare, right? And she said, yeah. Because she was saying no one should eat any dairy products. And she said yes to the daycare question. And I said, well, did you hear about this, what happened recently? And she said yes. And I said, you still take your child to a daycare, right? Well, yeah. What does that have to do with farming? I said, it's the same thing. She had heard a story about a bad farm, which is what brought her attention, or made her say that nobody should eat any, dairy products there. And I said, but so that, just like there can be a bad apple in that industry, you still take your child to your daycare because you trust your daycare and it's a good daycare and they take good care of your child. So I just, opened and said, stop anytime. You don't need to call me. You don't need to plan it. You just stop in at the farm and I'll show you any part of the farm that you want to see. Because I said, if you learn where it comes from, what it looks like, she had never been on a large dairy farm or really a dairy farm at all. Of course, she never showed up, but at least I put it out there and maybe made her think about it a little more. So we do a lot of tours and field trips throughout the year. Everything from farmers in the industry looking for new ideas to schools, daycares, international groups. We have a long-standing history of involvement with 4-H and FFA. Myself and Brian and his wife Rhonda, we all went to school together. We're in FFA together. Actually met my husband, or I knew him from school, but he asked me out for the first time when I was showing cattle here at the Dane County Fair. And so our family has been very active in that, and we're very, very proud of those groups and like to support them. We had our local FFA out last week. They organized a day on the farm for the third graders from their school district, and it was a great day of learning. They had stations around the farm and taught the younger kids about all the different aspects of farming, not only dairy farming. So that was great. And then, like I said before, we've hosted June Dairy Month events. 2002, Dane County Breakfast on the Farm at DeForest. Last summer, we did that at the Middleton Farm. And then in 2006, we had the Mood Day Brunch at our Arlington Farm. We work closely with different organizations like Professional Dairy Producers of Wisconsin. Just to help, we hold training seminars and sessions at our farms. One that I'm particularly proud of and do on a regular basis is it's called APPS training. For we've had it's for people that are not in agriculture. They didn't grow up in agriculture. They don't have a degree in agriculture, but their job pertains to it somehow, some way. So, example, advertising executives from like Quick Trip and Walmart, and they're advertising products that are from milk products, vegetables, things like that. And all of a sudden there's this huge thing where everyone wants to know where their food came from, which is good, that they don't always understand it. So we need these marketing executives to understand where it comes from before they can correctly and accurately, hopefully, do their job and hopefully have correct information in there. So we do a 3-day, basically it's like Farming 101, and we go over the highlights of farming in general. It also just gives them a contact people to ask questions and things like that down the road if they need more information on a certain subject. So that's a really neat program that PDPW does. And I think that's about it for our main presentation, and we can take questions if you guys have them. I'm going to have Brian and Art, Lori, and Dean, or whoever is going to come up to help me answer questions as they jump up right away to come up here. Do we have any
Do you have
questions?
any questions for the group?
Maybe not.
All right.
Yeah.
How is the bulk of your feed stored? It looks on the pictures like you use a lot of ag bags, and you still use the harvesters.
Harvesters, we store high moisture corn and ground going in, and we'll still use those. 100% of the corn silage is stored in bunkers for efficiency of harvest. Haylage is probably going to be about 75% stored in bags. Just we don't have enough bunker space through all the expansions, and we can put wetter feed in bags if it's going to rain. We can go up to 70% and still get cow feed. If we put that in a bunker, we're going to have butyric feed quality issues. And so pretty much almost anything we put in a bag will come back out as cow feed again. And so that's why we use bags as much as possible. It takes a lot more surface area to do, but when it's going to start raining, we can just turn the key on the bagger and go home. Where the bunker, we're going to cover through the rain so that it doesn't get wet, even if we're not done harvesting. And so.
Any more questions out there?
When you built the enclosed calf farm, did you deal with respiratory issues at all, or how do you keep healthy runs in an enclosed barn?
We've been dealing with that since we built. The question was when we built the enclosed calf barns with regards to respiratory. They were built as open-sided ventilated barns, no fans. Over the years, we put 2 different systems in for tubes. We just recently at the DeForest farm put in, there's a tube over each row of stalls, and so and it's variable speed fans, and this year has been better respiratory in there than we've had prior. It's moving, exchanging the air, I think. Remember what the number is? I don't know if it's 4 times, I don't know if it's minute, hour, I don't remember what it is, but
I think it just says
it's
4 times the exchange rate of normal.
It's got a flap in for the summer that it'll make the holes bigger so we get more airflow in the summer. In the winter, it still runs all winter long, but a flap comes down and it brings out smaller holes that you're not putting such a draft on the calf. The ventilation has been better since we've done it. Art's calf barn's a little different than ours, same concept, but we left this 2 foot or a 4 foot gap behind the stall to the outer wall. And that seems to ventilate better without the fan than what we had, having the stall right up to the end wall, closed up, 5 feet high. And so, is that fair?
Oh, yeah, and then she has one in back too. Or not the back row, but like
Yeah.
second.
Am I catching you? Yeah, that's all right. I can walk fast.
Thanks. 2 questions. Are you growing all your own silage, or what percent of your silage are you growing? And the other question is, who do you look to, who do you talk to try and make those business decisions about what to add, when to add?
Grow all our own forage, either between our own land base. We crop probably about 4,600 acres of our own, and we buy feed off of about another 1,200 acres. And so everything is custom grown, the excess, but we have full control over varietal through a program that we do with manure that we put back onto the field after we take silage off. And we dictate the variety and planting date to try and get. We need a 3-week harvest window. This year didn't work so well because it all dried up at the same time, unfortunately. But normally we get a 3-week harvest window that will maintain 67% forage from start to finish. This year just didn't work. And the second question was the financial. He's sitting in the back room. We have an advisor from Compeer, Steve Bodart, that we meet with quarterly to go through financials and helps with the advising of where are the directions going.
Land-based, what do you see in the future?
It's expensive. As far as what?
Are you gonna move? I mean, you got opportunities to buy, there's dairies going out in Wisconsin. Are you thinking about expanding or?
And personally, until markets turn around, I don't see expansion in our area. It's not gonna happen in our area very easily. It's too expensive to operate in Dane County with restrictions regarding everything around the lakes that we get to deal with. And DNR, everything's is more challenging. And so you're gonna have to go out, and we're not to that point yet that we really wanna travel and have an expansion somewhere else at this point. But Dane County, it's tough to operate in our little pocket. Northern Dane County, there's a lot of cows in a small area. You guys wanna talk?
With your sand separator, do you feel like your sand is as clean or good quality as when you get it fresh from the sand pits or whatever? And also, do you think the upfront cost of your sand separator make price overall with saving on equipment and wear and tear?
The quality wise, we were testing new sand coming in, and it exactly isn't clean in itself, with different bacterias at times. And so it's not everybody thinks it's fresh sand, that it's gonna be clean, but it's not 100% clean either. We source sand from the other side of La Crosse, so it's trucked in from 2 hours away, so we can recapture 95+% of the sand that we separate. We have a pit a mile from the farm, but we don't get it from it because sand in our area is fine sugary sand. We need river bottom sand, and then other areas are manufactured sand. So we're trucking it in, higher initial costs, but we're not losing the sand. We went from buying between the 2 dairies probably 20 loads a week, dump truck loads, to we're probably 30 loads a year. The maintenance cost, it's a hard one to put a dollar figure on because where we got our sand from was a mile away. It didn't cost us anything to get it. Versus other areas, they had trucking costs on top of the sand. It's an easier payback than what we had. But I still think the initial investment is worth it. Our only hindrance is we have 2 sites. We had to double it up. One facility would have done both farms, but they're 4 miles away. And so we have two identical facilities sitting 4 miles away that just slightly larger would have taken place for both farms. But we're able to pump manure now 4 miles away. We can go out 4 to 5 miles with drag line with sand in. 2.5 is about all we'd want to muster with enough pumps to be able to get it out there. And so it opened up our land base to not have to truck it. And it took weight off the roads.
What is involved in your sand washing process?
Process is an internal loop process from Comro that manure comes in from the barns through a flush flume system. It's all done with water through a 24-inch pipe, and then it comes into a cross channel that 80% of the sand's gonna drop out of in an auger, which will collect it to a central point and auger it up the sand washer. The remaining sand is gonna be caught in a little settling lane, all inside of a building so that it operates 365 days a year. We have to add a little heat in the middle of winter to keep it warm enough so nothing freezes for the water. But it's not bringing dirty water back from the lagoon. Everything's internal with the water from the parlors, from the flush water, the CIP water, and then a little bit of fresh water for the last rinse of the sand going out the washer. When we first built, we wanted it drier, so we left it sit on a pile for 3 weeks thinking we wanted drier sand. Couldn't get our somatic cell down. We are now putting it in 2 to 3 days later after separation, and we're back to around 100,000 somatic cell on one farm and about 150 on the other. Instantly dropped to 50,000 when we just made the switch from 3 weeks to 3 days within a month. And so it seems to get rid of the bacteria, putting it in the stalls and letting it dry out there than in the pile and harboring bacteria. So.
Has your family used an agency or a person to help figure out whose role is what as far as financially and how the partnership works? How does that go for a big operation like that?
Walter. Yeah. The senior partner that is no longer here basically set up how the structure has gone with everybody's input.
It would have been with him and the attorney.
Him and our attorney, but it's a mix of everybody. We had our accountant, our attorney, my dad and Arts, but Walter was our integral part of how our structure got set up and transition from. It's different from my grandfather to these guys as it is from my dad and 2 uncles to the next generation that is not their kids. And so we have a partnership agreement is what we operate under that dictates everything, how everything's done while we're living and after we pass away. That states how everything goes.
Yeah, do you use genomic testing, sex semen, in something relatively new using beef bulls on some of your cows that you don't care if you capture a replacement?
Art's probably a little bit different than what we do with slightly because he's more registered. But we're all sex semen on the heifers. You're probably doing the same, correct? Genomic testing, we were doing it so we could figure. We have too many heifers once you go to sex semen because we want them for lower death rate on the calves coming in from the heifers, and for us that was big. But we have too many heifers now. We were genomic testing to figure out how to sell, but we overrun our calf barn and buried ourselves in calves that we now just parent average before they're born and sell the calves off right as they're born. Because we want the cows, but we don't need all the calves. And so we're figuring out ahead when we stop genomic testing, you're going to still do some genomic testing. And yeah, the bottom 25 to 30% of our cows are bred to beef. Simple fact that we're only getting $40 to $50 for a Holstein bull calf and $250 for a Angus calf. $50 for heifer calf. They're not worth anything at this point. At some point, the whole industry is going to bury the beef market. That they're not going to be worth anything either. But we'll see when that happens. That's a fine question. I don't know.
difference now is that I think more people are understanding that there's too many heifers, so they're using beef semen. Going into this, everyone was naive and you just thought, have more heifer calves, it'll be great. Now that the heifer population is too high, if everyone's planning 9 months in advance, that you set up a program, if you're gonna use sex semen, that you use in beef semen, it'll self-align itself. That's, I think, how the industry will change. You'll end up having more beef cattle.
Go ahead.
You guys touched a little bit as far as, employee retention. Obviously, labor is a big deal in a lot of different industries right now, particularly with dairy. A few things that you did as far as training for your employees, sense of family you would like to bring to your operation. You got maybe a couple of best management practices that you guys say works really well working with the employees, identifying them, developing, that you could share?
Basically, communication seems to be number one. They want to be involved, and the fact that we treat them like they're like family. They're just like everybody else on the farm. We don't separate anything out. Like she said, that we'll have everything translated, just even if it doesn't pertain to them, so they don't feel they're being left out. It is getting harder to find labor, and not even on the milking crew. Locals for doing field work. It's not as easy to find people that want to work nights and weekends to drive tractor even anymore. And so the whole labor part is the other reason why expansion in our area is tough. They all can go to Madison, and that's the big hindrance of living so close to Madison. Infinite job market, 15 miles away, and you have to compete with that. Because when McDonald's is starting at $11.50 or $12 in our area, we're stuck trying to deal with that. But housing is a big deal. We charge for housing. It's not just free, but it seems to be a big deal to have access to housing that they don't have to go out and figure out how to rent an apartment. And so I don't know if it's an issue that they have a hard time renting, or if they just don't want to be tied down, that we have houses that they'll rent, and like I say, we don't give it for free. But it seems to be that's been the biggest retention thing, because the first question that they'd ask when you're interviewing, do you have housing available? If you didn't, right back out the door they go.
And I've noticed that that used to be more strictly with our Hispanic employees. In this last year, it has been an overall question for a lot
everybody.
more of the applicants. Not, you know what I mean? And they're looking for houses for their families and things, which is obviously
And that's the other disadvantage of living next to Madison. We're an expensive area to live. There's no cheap housing anywhere.
Do you have any recommendations relative to maintenance or what's expected of them regarding when they're in your facility as far as cleanliness, and do you have to have inspection periodically?
We do a periodic inspection that one of the shop guys is in charge of. That when they have their monthly meetings, that we alert them that there possibly could be an inspection that day, so they know that he might be in there. The cleanliness is a tough deal because they have their own way of living, just like everybody, and so we try to force what we can. But at the end of the day, if it's tolerable, wait till they move out and we clean it and start all over again.
we have an agreement too.
We have a rental agreement, but it doesn't hold. It's back to the guy's got to want to clean, and it's hard. It's a hard one. But any maintenance comes back to our shop. If they have problems with anything in the rooms, we've tried to make all the rooms as similar as possible regarding AC and this and that, so they're not all fighting over who gets what room in different houses and this and that. So, and yes.
How do you deal with the language issue? Are you, for example, learning Spanish, and are you teaching those Spanish speakers English?
I don't speak Spanish.
Brian,
My brother Dean has maybe done a little more training, but we're not fluent in Spanish. That's with the translators when we have our meetings. We have enough key guys that are bilingual that do all our daily translation if we need a correction or something changing. But none of us are fluent in Spanish, and
Technology has been really helpful with the smartphones. There's apps you can talk into, and then it switches it, and then they do the same on their phone. And I've used that a lot with our employees.
and they'll do that with us if they got a
Yeah.
question and they don't have the translation or the translator guy. They'll do that with me as well, and
And I
so
know
it works.
Some of them find classes in the area to go to and things too. That's harder because of their schedules. They work so much. It makes it hard for them to find time. Were you gonna say something, Mary? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask you to repeat the question, but I think people figured out where we're at with the question. I think we have time for one or two more questions, if there's any from the floor. Otherwise, I guess we're done. So. Enjoy the rest of your day at World Dairy Expo, and thank you again to the Meinholz family and Blue Star Dairy for being here today.